The sound you just heard, that sharp, piercing crash, was a $12,000 antique Wedgwood porcelain plate shattering across the marble floor. And yes, that was the fifth one this week. 10-year-old Chloe Kingsley, the only daughter of billionaire Lauren Kingsley, had long carried a reputation that made even adults hesitate. She had reduced military-trained tutors to tears on their very first day, and Ivy League-educated psychologists would rather run than spend one more minute with Chloe. Chloe was like a hurricane dressed in Chanel, a riddle that no amount of Lauren's money could solve. The media had given the girl a title that sent chills down people's spines: the uncontrollable heiress. Lauren Kingsley, meanwhile, was standing on the edge of collapse. She had tried everything, every specialist, every therapy, every piece of advice, except him. Grant Nolan, 32 years old, a single father working as a janitor in an office building in Boston. He was 3 months behind on rent, raising a 6-year-old son, and, to be completely honest, he couldn't tell the difference between a high society gala in Beacon Hill and a picnic in Boston Common. And he was about to do something no one had ever dared to do. He was about to say no to Chloe Kingsley. If you've listened this far and feel like this story is about to pull you into something big, hit subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Our stories always begin at moments like this. So then, what happens when a girl no one can control meets a single father who's not afraid of anyone? Are you ready to find out? The Harbor Cafe wasn't the kind of coffee shop Boston's elite mentioned in glossy magazines, but it had a dignity of its own. Located on Newbury Street, just far enough from Back Bay to keep prices reasonable, it served lawyers grabbing a quick lunch and artists lingering over a single cup of coffee for hours. Grant Nolan knew every one of them. At 32, Grant moved with a kind of almost athletic agility. His mind often drifted to distant places, calculating interest on overdue bills or dissecting a theory from the psychology book he kept hidden under the counter. Grant was an observer. He noticed the trembling hands of a businessman before the man ordered a double espresso, the exhaustion on a young mother's face before she asked for the check. Grant's life was a lesson in controlled chaos. 2 jobs, daytime janitorial work at Kingsley Industries, nighttime shifts at the Harbor Cafe, and a 6-year-old son named Ethan, the child Grant had been raising alone since his wife passed away from a terminal illness 3 years earlier. Grant was tired, but he hadn't collapsed. The name Lauren Kingsley was something he knew only from the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. She was the queen of Boston's biotech world, the woman who had built Kingsley Biotech from a tiny laboratory into a global biomedical empire. She was also notoriously reclusive after her husband, Jonathan Kingsley, died in a boating accident 2 years earlier. But the name Chloe Kingsley echoed in a very different way, a shared dread among Boston's most seasoned service workers. The girl was a legend. Expelled from Pembridge Academy for coding spam software that crashed the school's email system, responsible for firing a team of 12 people, including a Michelin-starred chef, by accusing them of contaminating the air with garlic odor. 10 years old, and she had already racked up more power victories than a miniature dictator. Grant knew all of this because Mr. Henderson, a regular customer who managed a high-end nanny placement service, often sat at the bar, sipping whiskey and lamenting his inability to hire anyone for the Kingsley penthouse. "That kid is like a venomous snake, Grant," Mr. Henderson had whispered last week. "Sharp as a razor. But the poison is pure. Mrs. Kingsley is offering $500,000 a year, and no one is taking the job anymore. Not one person left." It was a drizzly Tuesday. The cafe was half empty, warm yellow lights reflecting off the damp mist outside. As soon as the bell over the door chimed, Grant looked up. A woman in a perfectly tailored black suit walked in, followed by a small girl who seemed to be carrying an entire storm field of anger around herself. He recognized the woman immediately. Lauren Kingsley. But today, she looked less like the power queen of magazine covers and more like someone imprisoned in her own life. Her eyes, once known for their boardroom sharpness, held nothing but exhaustion now. Chloe, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Dark brown hair tied in a neat ponytail, the crisp uniform of Cambridge Preparatory School looking both polished and smug. The girl didn't even have to try. Simply stepping inside made it feel like she'd claimed the entire room. Clearly, Chloe had found a new place to unleash chaos. "A table for two," Lauren said softly, her voice gentle. "Of course, ma'am." "This way," Grant replied, leading them to the quietest corner of the cafe. The moment they sat down, the familiar performance began. "This chair is wet," Chloe announced, crisp and matter-of-fact, as if reading an indictment. "It's not, Chloe," Lauren sighed, not even checking. "It is. I can feel it. Disgusting." The girl glanced up at the ceiling. "And that light is buzzing. It's giving me a headache. I can't eat here." "Chloe, please, just 20 minutes." "No." The girl lifted her water glass. "This water tastes like metal. Are you trying to poison me?" Grant stood there, observing, not annoyed, not frightened, just the quiet attention of a man who had read far too much about human behavior. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a structured script, an attempt to control her environment. She wasn't angry. She was manipulating. "I can bring you bottled water, miss," Grant said calmly. Chloe narrowed her eyes. Apparently she wasn't used to people who didn't panic. "I don't want bottled water. I want the kind we have at the penthouse, the one from Norwegian Springs. This is just tap water." "That's right," Grant nodded, unbothered. "The best tap water in Boston, double filtered." Lauren looked up at him, a flicker of surprise. Grant held her gaze for a second, then turned back to Chloe. "I'm Grant. I'll be serving you both today. Would you like me to bring you the best tap water again?" Chloe stared at him. The air tightened like a drawn bowstring. This was the moment when nannies fled, or managers apologized profusely. But Grant simply stood there, notepad in hand, as steady as an anchor in a storm. "I," Chloe said, her voice dropping low, "want a grilled cheese sandwich, but it has to be on multigrain bread, not white. And I want Gruyere, but not aged Gruyere. Cut off the crust. Don't cut it into triangles. Cut it into squares. And if there's even a little brown on it, I'm sending it back." "All right," Grant said, noting every detail. "Multigrain bread. Young Gruyere. No crust. Square cut. No browning. I've got it. And for you, ma'am." Lauren Kingsley looked at Grant as if he were some rare creature, or a small miracle she couldn't quite trust yet. "Just a black coffee." "Right away." Grant walked off, and he could feel, unmistakably, Chloe's eyes burning into his back, as though she had just discovered a new opponent. 10 minutes later, Grant returned. He set the coffee down in front of Lauren, and a plate in front of Chloe. It was perfect. Multigrain bread, lightly toasted, with 4 pale gold square sandwiches arranged neatly. Chloe inspected it. She lifted one piece, smelled it, flipped it over, set it down. Then, with one sudden violent sweep of her arm, she sent the plate, the sandwich, and the full glass of water crashing off the table. The cafe went silent. "It's brown!" Chloe hissed, her face pale. Lauren Kingsley collapsed into her chair, utterly defeated. She pressed her face into her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the floor. "I'm truly sorry." Grant didn't look at Lauren. He didn't look at the broken plate. He looked straight at Chloe. He could feel the entire cafe watching him. He saw manager Tom Holbrook bursting out from the kitchen, face flushed red. This was it. This was the moment he would get fired because of the tantrum of a spoiled child. "Mrs. Kingsley, Tom began, but Grant raised his hand. A small gesture, yet somehow it stopped him. Grant knelt down, grabbing a stack of napkins from a nearby station. He didn't start cleaning the large mess. He picked up a single soggy crust from the floor. He looked at it, then at Chloe. Lauren had already pulled out her wallet, a thick black Amex sliding into view. "I'll pay for everything. The plate, the food. I'll cover everyone's meals. I'm so sorry." "It was brown," Chloe repeated, but her voice was smaller now. The explosion was over, and what lingered was only the quiet aftermath. Grant ignored the credit card. He ignored the manager. He lifted the soggy crust. "You're right," Grant said, his voice soft but carrying through the silent room. "This side is a little darker than the other. My mistake. I should have checked more carefully." Chloe's head snapped up. Her jaw literally dropped. Of all possible reactions, yelling, crying, soothing, threatening, the simple and factual agreement was something she had never encountered. "But I have a question," Grant continued, still kneeling, lowering himself to her eye level. "That throw, was that a level 10 or just around a 7.5? The plate traveled pretty far, but the water splash was a bit messy, not very controlled." Lauren lifted her head from her hands. Tom, the manager, looked as though his brain had short-circuited. Chloe couldn't form words. She just stared. "I'm just saying," Grant added, starting to gather the broken porcelain pieces. "If you're going to make a scene, it should be spectacular. That one was fine. A bit cliché, table flip trend stuff. You seem smart. I bet you can come up with something more original." A tiny smile, almost invisible, flickered across Chloe's lips before she crushed it down. "Shut up," she muttered. "I'm serious," Grant said, standing up. "All that energy? And for what? A wet floor? Very anticlimactic. Now, are you still hungry? Or was that performance art?" I'm not hungry." "All right, then you'll have to sit while your mother finishes her coffee, which, by the way, is getting cold." Grant calmly cleaned the mess. He brought Lauren a fresh coffee and a new glass of water for Chloe. He did not apologize. He did not placate. He was simply himself. For the first time, Chloe Kingsley was silent. She didn't complain about the lighting. She didn't tap her foot. She just sat there, watching Grant wipe down the floor, her expression a mixture of deep and total confusion. Lauren drank her coffee. She paid, including a generous but not excessive tip to cover the broken plate, and stood. "Thank you," she said to Grant, her voice hoarse. "That's my job," he replied. As they walked toward the door, Chloe glanced back over her shoulder. Her eyes met Grant's. Grant gave a small, non-committal shrug. Chloe didn't smile, but she didn't scowl either. She just looked. 1 hour later, just as Grant was about to finish his shift, Tom called him into the office. "I don't know what that whole thing earlier was, Nolan," he said, rubbing his temples and sighing, "but my heart can't take that kind of stuff. Just don't do it again." "Do what, exactly?" Tom waved a hand. Then he handed Grant his phone. "Mrs. Kingsley's assistant just called. She wants you to call this number back. Said it's urgent." Grant looked down. It wasn't just a string of digits. It looked like a summons. A cold feeling crept from his stomach up into his chest. Was he about to get sued? Or was he about to be offered something far beyond his capability? Far beyond the life he knew? He honestly wasn't sure which option was worse. That night, in his cramped apartment, after Ethan had gone to bed and the entire place had settled into the quiet rhythm of working-class living, Grant finally dared to call. "Mr. Nolan," a woman's voice said through the phone, precise and professional to the point of being slightly intimidating. "Mrs. Kingsley would like to meet you. Her car will arrive at your building within the next hour." Not a question, not a request, an order. 1 hour later, a sleek black Mercedes S-Class, the kind of car that whispered of social strata Grant had never once brushed against, pulled up to the curb. When Grant opened the door and slid into the back seat, he felt as though he had stepped into an entirely different dimension. The car glided forward, impossibly smooth, heading toward Back Bay. toward the world of people who didn't just buy objects, but sometimes bought the destinies of others. The Kingsley Industries building rose like an arrow of glass and steel, piercing the Boston skyline. Grant was escorted straight to a private elevator, and when the doors opened, they didn't reveal a reception area as he expected, but led directly into Lauren Kingsley's penthouse office. The room was vast enough to overwhelm, its floor-to-ceiling windows opening onto the dark, velvet-smooth expanse of Boston Harbor. The space was minimalist, cold, decorated with artwork that was probably priceless, yet strangely devoid of human warmth. Lauren Kingsley stood beside the window. Here, surrounded by power and wealth, she no longer resembled the exhausted woman from the cafe. She looked like a queen, formidable and composed. "Mr. Nolan, thank you for coming." "You didn't give me much of a choice," Grant replied, his hand tightening around the strap of his shoulder bag. A faint smile brushed her lips. "No, I suppose not. Please, sit." Grant sat on the leather sofa, soft, deep, and almost certainly more expensive than the car he rode in. "I'll be direct," Lauren began, turning away from the window to face him. "What I witnessed today, no one has ever managed that. You didn't indulge her, you didn't yell at her, and you didn't break." "I was just doing my job." Lauren shook her head. "No, you did more than that. You saw her. Others only see a monster or a paycheck, but you saw something else." "What was it?" Grant paused to think. "I saw a kid who's very good at her job, and her job is to make people leave." Lauren nodded gently. "Exactly. She's very good at that. She's burned through 7 nannies in 6 months, 3 behavioral therapists, Pembridge Academy, Cambridge Prep, and now she's about to be expelled again. I've run out of options. I can handle logistics problems worth billions, but I can't—" Her voice broke. "I can't reach my own daughter." That vulnerability, spoken in a room filled with towering power, made the words even heavier. "Mrs. Kingsley, I'm just a janitor. I'm studying psychology, but I'm nowhere near qualified to do something like this." "The qualified ones already failed," she said, walking toward her desk. "They came with degrees and methodologies, and she devoured them in 3 minutes. They're afraid of her, or they're afraid of me. But you're not." She turned back, her gaze sharp but not hostile. "I want to hire you, Mr. Nolan, not as a nanny, not as a tutor, as a companion, a handler. I don't know what to call it. I want you beside her after school, on weekends, to do what you did today. Whatever that was." Grant's head spun. I can't. I have a job. I have a son." "I'll pay you," Lauren said, without preamble. $450,000 a year. Grant froze. That number wasn't a salary. It was salvation. No more debt, no more fear, no more scraping by. "I will also," Lauren continued, "cover the full tuition for your master's and PhD at any school you choose. Harvard, MIT, anywhere. And I'll arrange the best after-school program in Boston for your son. Completely free." He had to be dreaming. He had to be. "Why me?" Grant whispered. "Because you're the first person she's looked at without contempt in 2 years. And because you dared to call her boring." Grant didn't have time to react before a voice sharp as a blade sliced across the room. "Lauren, you cannot be serious." A woman stepped out from the inner office. Tall, thin, elegant to the point of severity, a minimalist black dress, a Bottega Veneta bag, a perfectly cut blonde bob. She looked at Grant with pure, naked disdain. "This is a child, not a stray dog. You can't just pick up some man off the street and bring him home." "Evelyn, this doesn't concern you," Lauren said, her tone instantly colder. "Chloe is my niece. It concerns me entirely," Evelyn Mercer snapped. Then she stabbed her gaze into Grant. "You're a janitor. What could you possibly offer my niece? A gourmet grilled cheese recipe? Lauren clenched her jaw. Evelyn. No, Grant said, his voice steadying again as he stood. You're right, Mrs. Mercer. I'm not qualified. I don't have prestigious degrees, and I don't belong in this world. He gestured at the gold-edged room. But I have nothing to lose. Everyone else wants to keep their job, wants to impress you. He looked directly at Lauren. I don't want your money. Both Lauren and Evelyn stared at him, startled. I mean, I do, Grant corrected quickly, face flushing. It's an insane amount of money, but it can't be the reason I do this. If I agree, I have conditions. Evelyn scoffed. Conditions? You have no right. What conditions? Lauren interrupted. One, Grant said, standing tall. You're right. I'm not a nanny, and I won't play one. I'm not a servant. I'm not a friend. I'm just a person. I'm not here to fix her. I'm here to be with her. Agreed, Lauren said instantly, without hesitation. Two, Grant continued, turning to Evelyn. Mrs. Mercer needs to stay away from me, and stay away from Chloe, when I'm with her. Your involvement is not helping. Evelyn's face stretched tight, trembling with anger. How dare! Mrs. Kingsley, Grant asked, eyes locked on Lauren. Lauren looked at her sister, then said each word clearly. Evelyn, I am handling this. Please, step out. You'll regret this, Lauren, putting my niece in the hands of an amateur. Reckless. Evelyn shot Grant a look so poisonous the air seemed to freeze before she strode out. Lauren turned back. And the third condition? 3, Grant said, taking a breath. You have to participate. I'm not your replacement. If I call you, you show up. If I say you need to be at dinner, you're there. No excuses. No board meetings. No busy schedule. Otherwise, this is pointless. Your money can't buy you an escape from this. Lauren Kingsley, the woman who could make the entire Boston tech industry tremble, looked at a 32-year-old janitor giving her demands. And for the second time that day, she did something no one expected. She smiled. A real smile, tired but genuine. When can you start? The Kingsley penthouse didn't resemble a home. It resembled a declaration. The top 3 floors of a historic Beacon Hill building rebuilt into a maze of glass and marble. Sparse, angular furniture. Artwork so extravagant it seemed to smother any trace of human warmth. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that presses against your eardrums. Staff members, all in dark uniforms, moved like ghosts. Silent steps, lowered eyes, never making direct contact. At the center of this fortress was Chloe. Grant's first official day on the job fell on the following Monday. He arrived at 3:30 p.m., right as the private driver brought Chloe home from Cambridge Prep. Chloe stepped into the vast entry hall, spotted Grant, and her already cold expression tightened further. You? She said, not bothering to hide her displeasure. Me, Grant replied. Lifting a paper bag, I brought you a grilled cheese sandwich, multigrain bread, young Gruyere, crust removed, square cut, lightly toasted. Chloe glared at the bag as if it contained poison. I'm not hungry. All right then. Grant sat down on the modern bench, one of those expensive-looking pieces that somehow managed to be horrible to sit on. He opened the bag and pulled out a piece of the sandwich. I am. And he sat there eating a grilled cheese sandwich right in the center of the grand foyer, completely at ease. Chloe crossed her arms, eyes locked on him. You're not allowed to eat here. Where am I allowed to eat? In the kitchen, with the staff. My job is companion, not staff, Grant said, taking another bite. By the way, this bench is terrible, but it's here. Want a piece? No. I have homework. Chloe turned sharply and walked up the floating glass staircase like she was starring in a fashion commercial. Okay, I'll be right here, Grant called after her. For 3 hours, Grant actually stayed there. He read his psychology textbook, did a crossword, walked around the first floor, observing. And what unsettled him most was the lack of life. No family photos, no personal trinkets, no traces of living. Just a perfectly curated design. So perfect, it was soulless. At 6:30, a chef appeared and announced softly that dinner was ready. Grant stepped into the dining room, a hall-sized space with a table long enough to seat 30 people. But there were only 2 place settings, one at each far end. Chloe appeared, sat down, unfolded her napkin. Not a word. Grant sat at the opposite end, nearly squinting to see her. "Could you pass the salt?" he asked. The salt shaker was about 20 feet away from him. Chloe stared at him, then at the salt, then at him again. "No." "All right." Grant stood, walked the entire length of the table, retrieved the salt, walked back, and sat down. They ate in silence. The food was so upscale that Grant had to study it to know what he was eating. Seared scallops with saffron risotto. Chloe only nibbled. "So," Grant said, "how's Cambridge prep? Better or worse than Pembridge?" "Boring," Chloe answered. "What's boring?" "Everything. The teachers are stupid. The students are stupid. Everyone's stupid." "Must be lonely," Grant said, "being the only smart person in the entire building." Chloe's fork froze mid-air. "You're stupid too," she said. "Probably," Grant nodded. "I'm failing advanced statistics. That class is destroying me. But I'm pretty good at spotting liars." Chloe set her fork down with a loud clink. "I'm not lying." "Yes, you are. You don't think they're stupid. You think something else." "But stupid is a great word. It's like a shield. You use it to keep people out, to stop them from asking further questions." Chloe shot up from her chair. "I'm done." And she walked out. The first week went exactly like that. Chloe tested. Grant sidestepped. Chloe insulted. Grant agreed, then redirected. Grant was like a calm, steady wall, immune to her storms, and that drove Chloe absolutely mad. She was used to explosions. Grant only gave her an echo. In the second week, Chloe escalated. When Grant arrived, he found her sitting in the library, a wide room full of books, yet devoid of anything resembling the warmth of a 10-year-old's life. Chloe didn't look up at the sound of his footsteps. She simply announced, as if reading a morning business report, "I'm studying a new startup. It's called Lingo Leap, an AI language tutor." "Sounds interesting," Grant replied, his tone as mild as ever. "My mother is considering investing. She wants my opinion. I'm supposed to practice French with it. Would you like to hear a sample?" "I don't speak French," Grant said. "Exactly." Chloe smiled, a small, cruel smile, sharp as a knife's edge. She tapped her tablet. Instantly, a stream of flawless, fluid French filled the room, dripping with smug superiority. Then Chloe turned to Grant, her eyes gleaming with anticipation of the humiliation she expected. "What do you think of its intonation?" Grant knew this game. It wasn't a question. It was a ritualized psychological execution, the same tactic she had used on dozens of adults who had wandered into her life. "Sounds like French," Grant said, expression unchanged. "It says," Chloe continued, her voice slick with contempt, "that only an uneducated, low-class idiot would wear cheap shoes like yours. It's wondering if you bought them at a thrift store." Grant looked down at his sneakers, the edges worn. "They are from a thrift store. Good eye. But your AI is wrong." Chloe lifted her head, brow tightening. "Wrong? Yeah. My shoes aren't cheap. They were 75 cents. That's extremely cheap. Not expensive. There's a difference." Grant looked up, calm as ever. "Now, did it insult anything else?" Chloe's smile vanished. This time, the trap didn't close. The arrow shot, and missed completely. It finished," Chloe said, the certainty in her voice slipping away. Grant nodded, offering no triumphant jab, no smug remark. "All right, then. The uneducated guy here is going back to his book. If you want to teach me some more French curse words, just call." He turned and walked away, leaving Chloe frozen in the library, her small shoulders stiff, simmering, confused, and for the first time, utterly unsure how to strike back. The breakthrough, when it happened, came completely by accident. Grant was wandering around the second floor looking for a bathroom when he walked past a door left slightly ajar. Music drifted out. Not the cold classical pieces that occasionally played in the hallways, but something alive, raw, instinctive. A piano struggling, stumbling, trying, and failing. Someone was playing a brutally difficult Chopin piece, tripping over notes, gasping, muttering small curses, and starting over again. Grant pushed the door open a little wider. The room was pitch black, clearly abandoned for a long time. Furniture was draped in white cloths like sleeping ghosts. Only one thing wasn't covered: the grand Bosendorfer piano, so exquisite it seemed to glow in the dark. And sitting in front of it was Chloe, but not the Chloe of rehearsed rage. Not the Chloe who weaponized manipulation until adults cried. This Chloe was playing with her whole body, with fury, with a loneliness she would never admit. Her small fingers attacked the keys as if trying to rip the notes out of the metal, beautiful, wild, and desperate. She hit a difficult chord. She slammed her fist down onto the keys, and in that moment, in the glossy reflection of the piano lid, she saw Grant. "Get out!" Chloe screamed, her voice slicing through the room as she slammed the lid shut. "That was—" Grant choked. He couldn't breathe. "Chloe, that was incredible. I didn't know. I said get out." Her voice cracked with something that wasn't pure anger. "You're not allowed here. No one is allowed in here. Chloe, it's okay. Get out! Get out!" She grabbed the metronome from the piano and hurled it at him. Grant ducked on instinct. The device exploded into pieces against the doorframe behind him. "All right," Grant said softly, no resistance in his voice. He stepped back. "I'm leaving. I'm sorry." He closed the door gently, his heart pounding as if he'd sprinted a mile. And in that moment, Grant knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had not intruded on a tantrum. He had accidentally seen the real heart Chloe kept hidden from the world. Not the manipulator, not the uncontrollable heiress, but a child, brilliant, wounded, and utterly alone inside her glass fortress. Grant went downstairs to find Lauren. She had just arrived back at the penthouse. "Mrs. Kingsley, I need to speak with you." Lauren immediately tensed. "What happened? Did she break something?" "No, not like that." Grant swallowed, searching for words. "Chloe was playing the piano in a room on the second floor. When she saw me, she panicked as if I'd just uncovered a national secret." Lauren's face went pale. A tremor rippled through her shoulders. She had to place a hand against the wall to steady herself. "The music room," she whispered, the words barely audible. Grant nodded gently. "She's very good, Lauren. She's not just messing around. She's practicing seriously. And she's incredible, but also in a lot of pain." Lauren closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again, filled with a haunted look. "That room belonged to my husband, Jonathan. He was a concert pianist. That was his space. I locked it after he died. I didn't even think Chloe had a key." "She doesn't just have a key," Grant said, sensing the pieces falling into place. "She's been practicing in there, alone, and that room seems like the one place where all the feelings she won't show anyone else finally explode." Lauren stared at Grant, her eyes hollow, as if she'd just heard a verdict. "I thought I was protecting her," she whispered, "by locking that door, by moving forward. But all this time, she's been going back in there, in secret, alone, with her grief." The discovery of the music room changed everything. Lauren, though still shaken, had given Grant full permission to approach Chloe and talk about it. But Chloe immediately shut down. She closed her bedroom door, locked it, and declared herself sick. The walls went back up, thicker, higher, colder. 3 days later, Grant was sitting on the floor just outside Chloe's bedroom door. "Chloe, it's Grant. I left a bowl of soup outside your door." He heard a faint breath slip through the gap beneath it. Grant sat down, leaning against the wall, his voice quiet but steady enough to cut through the heavy silence between them. "You know," he said, "I used to be like you." The door cracked open slightly. Chloe peeked out, her eyes red from crying. "You used to be like me?" "Yeah," Grant nodded. When Sarah died, I was angry. Really angry. I snapped. I broke things. I hurt people because I wanted them to feel what I felt." The door opened wider. Chloe stood there, small, exposed, stripped of all her usual armor. "And what happened then?" she asked. "My neighbor," Grant said, offering a faint smile. "Martha Abbott. An old Italian lady who always smelled like flour and oregano. She didn't try to fix me. She just sat with me. She taught me how to play chess. And every time I blew up, she'd look at me calmly and say, 'That was a very dramatic move, but not a smart one. Find a smarter move.'" Grant looked at Chloe. "Everyone told me to move on. But Martha never said that. She just stayed. And little by little, I started finding calmer, smarter moves." Chloe slid down to the floor beside him, pulling her knees close to her chest. "I miss my dad," she whispered. "Every single day." "I know. Everyone keeps telling me to move on. They tell me to stop talking about him. But if I stop talking about him, then what? Then he disappears for real." Grant nodded. "I understand. With Ethan, my son, we still talk about his mom every day. We look at pictures, we tell stories, because she's still part of us." Chloe stared down at the floor. "My mom," her voice trembled. "She locked my dad's room. She never talks about him. It's like he never existed." "Not because she wants to forget," Grant said gently, "but because it hurts too much. Adults don't always know how to face things. They think if they don't talk about the pain, it'll go away. But really, it just makes the wound deeper." And that was when Chloe started to cry. Not the angry kind she used as a weapon, but the raw, breaking sobs of a child who had carried too much grief for far too long. "I was mad at my dad," she choked out. The day of the accident." Grant stayed quiet, giving her space. "That day, we were at the Marblehead Marina. He wanted to take me sailing. But I wanted to stay home and play games. And I told him I hated him." Tears streamed down her face. "He laughed," Chloe sobbed. "He said, 'All right, little princess, I'll prove you wrong. You'll see how fun sailing is.' Then he left by himself. And there was a storm. And he never came back." Grant pulled her into his arms, and Chloe didn't fight it. She clung to him like he was the last solid thing keeping her from sinking. "He never came back," she wept. "And the last thing I ever said to him was, 'I hate you.'" "He knew you didn't mean it," Grant said, his throat tight. "Fathers, they know." "No," Chloe shook her head desperately. "Aunt Evelyn told me at the funeral. She said, 'Your mother's heart is shattered. She'll never forgive you for this.'" Grant felt the blood in his body turn to ice. "Evelyn." "And my mom?" Chloe continued. "She doesn't talk about my dad. She locked his room. She doesn't say his name. She does that because she hates me. Because she blames me. And she's right. There. That was the poison. Not just grief, but guilt, planted inside a child's heart by Evelyn. And Lauren's long silence had only let it rot. "Chloe," Grant said, pulling back just enough to look her in the eyes. "Your Aunt Evelyn lied to you. But my mom? Your mom is not a bad person," Grant said, his voice firm in a way it rarely was. "She's just completely broken in her own way. She doesn't talk about your dad because she blames you. She doesn't talk about him because the pain is too much. But we're going to make her face it." "No," Chloe whispered, shaking her head. "I can't." "Yes, you can. I'm not letting Evelyn win, and I'm definitely not letting her ruin your life for one more day." Grant pulled out his phone, dialed Lauren. "You need to come home, right now." "Grant, I'm in a meeting." "I don't care if you're negotiating Middle East peace talks. Chloe needs you. Come home, now." Grant hung up. He didn't wait for an answer. 25 minutes later, Lauren Kingsley burst into the penthouse. Her face was pale, tight with panic. "What happened? Is she hurt? What happened?" Her eyes swept the room, then landed on them in the living area. Chloe sat curled up on the sofa, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. Grant stood in front of her, calm like a living shield. "What is going on?" Lauren asked, her voice shaking but powerful. "She needs to tell you something," Grant said, "and you need to listen. No interrupting." Lauren looked at her daughter. "Chloe, tell me, what is it, sweetheart? What's wrong?" I... Chloe's voice cracked, her eyes flicking toward Grant. He gave a small nod. "I killed Dad," Chloe whispered. Lauren's face shattered instantly. "What? What are you talking about, Chloe?" "Dad?" Chloe's voice trembled like a leaf. "I told him I hated him, and then he went sailing, and he fell. It was my fault. I know you blame me. Aunt Evelyn said—" "Evelyn?" Lauren breathed, a whisper laced with danger. She sank to her knees in front of her daughter, lifting Chloe's face with trembling hands. "Chloe, look at me." Chloe lifted her gaze, tears spilling freely. "What did Aunt Evelyn say to you?" "That you'd never forgive me. That I broke your heart." A sound escaped Lauren, deep, guttural, and painful. Grant had to look away. The grief in that moment was too raw to witness directly. Lauren wrapped her daughter in her arms, holding her tightly. "Oh, God! Chloe, no! Never! It was an accident, a horrible accident. You are not to blame. Not for 1 second did I blame you. But you locked Dad's room. You never talked about him." "Because I was stupid," Lauren said, her voice fracturing into pieces. "I thought I was protecting you. But really, I was running. I couldn't look at his things, couldn't hear his music. It hurt too much. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I was wrong. So wrong. Oh, Chloe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For the first time in 2 years, they were no longer a billionaire CEO and the greatest challenge of her life. They were simply a mother and a child, broken, clinging to each other so they wouldn't collapse. They cried together in the vast, cold living room, a space that, at last, contained something truly alive. Grant quietly stepped away, giving them privacy. He walked into the kitchen and made tea, his hands slightly shaking, his chest still heavy from what he had just witnessed. This was the hardest part. Not discipline, not schedules, but opening wounds that had been locked away for far too long. That night, Lauren came to find Grant. Her eyes were still red, but something in them was lighter, like a massive weight had finally been lifted from her chest. I don't have words good enough to thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. "Don't thank me," Grant replied. "Just don't stop. This is only the beginning. She needs you." "I know," Lauren exhaled, then reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small old bronze key, simple but strangely beautiful. I want you to have it." She placed the key in Grant's hand. "The key to the music room. I think It's time this house had music again. I want you and Chloe to open it." Grant smiled softly. "She already has a key. She's had one for a long time." Lauren blinked. "But this one," Grant said, looking down at the key in his palm, "will mean something different." The weeks that followed unfolded like early spring after a winter so long it felt endless. Following Grant's advice, Lauren began scheduling Chloe time directly into her calendar. And this time, she honored it. No cancellations, no rescheduling, no hiding behind board meetings as an excuse. They had dinner together every evening. They strolled through Boston Common under trees just beginning to change color. There was even a night when Lauren sat awkwardly on the sofa, clutching a game controller while her daughter coached her through a video game. There was awkwardness, there was hesitation, but there was also laughter, a sound no one had heard in this penthouse for 2 years. And the music room, the door once locked like a wound, now always stayed open. Grant and Chloe spent hours beside the Bösendorfer. Grant, who only knew a few simple pieces from childhood, tapped out clumsy melodies while Chloe sat beside him, frowning as she corrected every note, every finger, every beat. Her small fingers flew across the keys like wind. "Not like that," Chloe grumbled. Then she played the passage exactly as it should be played. For the first time in her life, Chloe was teaching someone. And from that tiny spark of confidence, she began to bloom. Not into an angel, but into a more human, more honest version of herself. She was still irritable, still sarcastic. But the venom had faded like morning mist. One evening, Lauren stood leaning against the doorframe of the music room, watching the two of them. Chloe tilted her head in concentration, Grant stumbled over a wrong note, and Chloe burst into laughter, the rare kind that almost never appeared. Tears pricked at the corners of Lauren's eyes. She looked at Grant. Grant looked back. No words, just a small nod, a silent thank you shining in her gaze. Evelyn Mercer's absence over the past few weeks was almost unnatural. Lauren had politely but bluntly asked her not to come to the penthouse anymore. But for someone like Evelyn, silence had never meant surrender. And that silence, to Grant, was more frightening than any threat. And then, the axe fell on a Thursday. When Grant arrived at the penthouse, he felt the atmosphere sink around him like stone. The staff huddled in the kitchen, whispering, eyes avoiding his. "What's going on?" Grant asked Linda Carver, the head housekeeper, usually as warm as a fresh-baked pie. Today, she wouldn't look at him. "Mrs. Kingsley is in her office," Linda whispered. "She wants to see you. And Mrs. Evelyn is there too." A cold line ran down Grant's spine. He walked to the office. The door was open. Lauren stood behind her desk, her face a stone mask, unreadable. Evelyn sat on a leather chair, legs crossed, wearing a look of sympathetic concern. The most terrifying expression Grant had ever seen on her. "Grant, come in," Lauren said, her voice strangely flat. "What's going on? Where's Chloe?" Grant asked. "In her room," Evelyn replied, her voice sweet as honey mixed with poison. "She's very upset. I'm sure you can imagine." "What happened?" Grant turned to Lauren. Lauren swallowed, then spoke. "This morning, I found something missing from the safe in my dressing room. A diamond necklace. It belonged to Jonathan." Grant's chest tightened. "What?" "His favorite necklace," Evelyn added smoothly, seizing the moment. "The Cartier Riviera." I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" Grant asked, feeling heat rise to his face. Lauren looked at him with pained eyes. "When I saw it was gone, I asked the staff. No one saw anything. But Evelyn said she needed to check something." Evelyn sighed, as if the situation pained her deeply. "I know you have freedom to move around the house, Grant. You're not staff. You come and go. I just had a bad feeling. So I checked your coat in the closet, the one you left here yesterday." She placed something on the desk. A small pawn shop receipt, white and flimsy. From a shop in the South End. The date? Yesterday. "We called the shop," Lauren said, her voice like ashes. "They have the necklace." Grant's breath caught. No, that's impossible. I've never even seen that necklace. I didn't take anything. Lauren, please, you have to believe me." "Grant," Lauren said. And the disappointment in her voice, it hit like a punch to the chest. "Lauren, he's very convincing," Evelyn inserted, resting a hand on Lauren's arm as if protecting her. "I know this is a shock. We all want to believe him. But men like that, from a different world, they're easily tempted. A necklace worth over $1 million. Who wouldn't waver?" "Waver?" Grant choked, fury trembling in his voice. You framed me. You did all this to push me out of this house, so Lauren would trust only you. You planted that receipt." "He's losing control," Evelyn said coolly. "Just like habitual thieves. Denial, deflection, projection. Lauren, I think you need to call the police." "The police?" Grant whispered. Reality seemed to crack around him. "Grand larceny," Evelyn said without hesitation. Grant turned to Lauren, nearly desperate. "Lauren, look at me. You know me. You know I didn't do this. Chloe and we've been making progress. You think I'd destroy everything just to steal some necklace?" Lauren exhaled, her voice heavy as stone. "Grant, I don't know how that receipt got into your coat, but I didn't put it there." "You have security cameras," Grant said quickly. "Check them." "I already did," Lauren said, sounding like she was strangling herself with every word. "The camera in the dressing room went offline. Network error. Nothing recorded these past 2 days." Grant shut his eyes. Of course, Evelyn was too experienced. "Lauren," Evelyn said softly, but sharp as a blade, "this is painful, but for Chloe's safety, we must do what's right. We can't keep a thief in the house." Lauren looked at Grant. Her face was a battlefield between instinct and the fake evidence that looked too perfect. Finally, she lifted her phone. Grant stopped breathing. But Lauren didn't call the police. "No," she said. "I'm not calling the police, not yet." "Lauren?" "Grant," she interrupted. "I think we no longer need your services. Please, leave. Return the key to me. I will handle the matter of the necklace." Not an arrest, but a cut far deeper. She was firing him, and worse, she believed he might have done it. Grant's eyes burned, not because he'd lost the job, but because of the betrayal. Because Evelyn had won, and Lauren had believed her. "Fine," Grant whispered. He took the key from his pocket and set it on the desk. "I didn't do this, and please tell Chloe I'm sorry." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room. Past the silent staff staring with fear and pity. He stepped into the elevator. The metal doors slid shut. Grant leaned against the wall, and a broken, guttural sob tore from his chest. Grant spent the entire next day in a dense fog. He sat in his small apartment with no TV on, no music, just the heavy silence pressing on his chest. Ethan, his 6-year-old son, was at school, completely unaware of the disaster that had just crashed into his father's life. Grant felt hollow. He had failed. Failed Chloe. He had let Evelyn, the venomous viper masquerading as a refined lady, defeat him. The doorbell rang, persistent, aggressive. He ignored it. It rang again, and again. Finally, he pressed the intercom. "Go away." "Open the door, you idiot. It's freezing out here." That voice, unmistakable. Chloe. Grant sighed and buzzed her in. A minute later, Chloe appeared at his apartment door. No driver, no security, hair wind-tangled, cheeks flushed from the cold and from anger. "Chloe, how did you even get here?" "You're supposed to be in school." "I took a cab," Chloe said. shoving him aside and marching into the apartment as if she owned it. My mother is and my aunt is a liar. Grant blinked. You don't think I did it? Obviously not, Chloe said, her voice sharp enough to cut. Stealing is a loud, stupid move. Exactly her style. Aunt Evelyn thinks I'm just a kid who plays piano. She forgets I'm my mother's daughter. Grant frowned. Meaning? Chloe tossed her backpack to the floor, yanked out her laptop like a detective who had gathered all the evidence she needed. I mean, I'm a programmer, she said, pride dripping off every word. I installed my own surveillance system months ago to monitor the staff. Aunt Evelyn was smart enough to disable the main system, but she knows nothing about mine. And the footage from my cameras uploads to a private cloud. Chloe's fingers flew over the keyboard so fast, Grant had to blink. Look. She spun the laptop toward him. Grant's heart thudded as the first video appeared. 2 days ago, Evelyn in the office, logging into the system and disabling the dressing room camera. The second video loaded immediately after. This morning, the angle from inside the closet showed Evelyn looking around, then slipping the pawn shop receipt into the pocket of Grant's coat. Everything snapped into place. She, Grant whispered, throat tightening. She framed me. Exactly, Chloe said, her voice colder than the air outside. And now, we're going to make the smart move. An hour later, Grant's apartment door burst open as if someone had stormed inside. Lauren Kingsley stepped in, breathing hard, her face pale from a tangled mix of anger and fear. Chloe, what are... Her voice caught when she saw her daughter standing in the middle of the room. What are you doing here? Did you skip school? It doesn't matter, Chloe said, without trembling, without looking away. Just look at this. She turned the laptop toward her mother. Grant stepped back, silent, like someone witnessing an earthquake about to hit. Lauren looked at the screen. One clip, then the next. She watched her Evelyn, her sister, disable the camera, then quietly slipped the pawn shop ticket into Grant's coat. No words came out of her mouth. No gasp, no scream. Only the slow, brutal shift of expression across her face, from confusion to realization to pain, and then to a cold, icy fury tightening every muscle in her body. The apartment was dead silent for a full minute. Chloe was the one who finally broke it. That was the smart move, Mom, she whispered, not bragging, but handing over a sword. Lauren lifted her eyes from the screen. She looked at her daughter, then at Grant, and she nodded slowly, deliberately. Yes, she said, her voice low but ringing like steel. A smart move. That night, Evelyn Mercer arrived at the penthouse with the air of someone triumphant, as if she were walking in to collect the shattered pieces of Lauren's life. But when the door opened, she froze. Lauren was standing there. Chloe was beside her. Grant sat quietly behind them. No one was broken. No one had collapsed. They were waiting for her. Lauren? What is going on? Evelyn pointed at Grant, stammering. That man, why is he still here? You need to call the police. He's a criminal. Lauren took one step forward. Her voice was chillingly calm. You're right. I should call the police. She lifted a remote control. But before that, I think they'll want to see this. She pressed play. The glow of the screen washed over Evelyn's face, and when she saw herself in the footage, disabling the camera, slipping the pawn shop receipt into Grant's coat, every trace of color drained from her skin. I did it for the family, Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. A last attempt to protect Chloe. From him. No, Lauren replied, her voice as sharp as steel honed to perfection. You did it because of her trust fund. You have been poisoning my daughter with guilt for 2 years, and you tried to frame an innocent man. She pointed to the door. Get out of my house. Lauren, please, I'm your sister. You are my sister, Lauren said, her voice growing colder with every word. And if you try to contact me or my daughter ever again, I will hand that entire video over to the district attorney's office. I will bury you completely." Evelyn said nothing more. She simply turned and nearly fled the room. The penthouse door closed behind her, leaving behind a silence so deep the entire space seemed to breathe. Lauren turned back. Her eyes met Grant's, and shame rose so sharply her voice came out ragged. "Grant, an apology isn't enough. What I did, accusing you, driving you out, was unforgivable." Grant shook his head gently, looking at Chloe first, then at Lauren. "Don't worry about me. Just don't stop now. This is only the beginning. She needs you." Lauren looked at her daughter, this child who had endured, who had fought, and who tonight had saved both of them. "I know," she whispered. She took a deep breath, as if preparing for a life-changing decision. "I'm going to start a foundation in my husband's name," she said. "The Jonathan Kingsley Project. It will fund music and arts programs for at-risk kids, kids like Chloe, kids who act out, because they're hurting." Then she looked directly at Grant. "I need someone who understands that. Someone who knows the difference between a loud move and a smart move. If you want it, the job is yours." Grant looked at Lauren. Then he looked at Chloe, who was trying, and failing, to hide a smile. A warm, powerful, unexpected feeling rose in his chest. Not pain this time, something else. Lighter, brighter. "Yes," Grant said, steady and sure. "I'll take it." 6 months later, Grant stepped into the penthouse. But this time, he was no longer the quiet janitor walking down the hallway. He was now a full-time graduate student at Harvard and the executive director of the Jonathan Kingsley Foundation. A new life, a new man. He followed the music echoing through the home, fractured yet warm notes guiding him toward the room with its door left open. And there, Lauren was seated at the Bosendorfer, trying to hold a steady bass line with slightly trembling hands. Beside her, Chloe, small hands but fierce, confident, was flying across the keys, playing a complex, flowing melody that seemed to light up the entire room. They were playing a duet. Chaotic, offbeat, wrong notes everywhere, and somehow, perfect. Lauren was the first to spot Grant. She smiled at him, a smile full of relief and pride. Chloe glanced his way, rolled her eyes as if annoyed, but the corner of her mouth lifted into a smile she tried very hard to hide. "You're late," Chloe said, half scolding, half teasing, and Mom played the wrong note again, from the top. Grant leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, quietly watching them. The room that once held shadows was now filled with light. Two people who had been torn apart by grief were now finding each other again through every keystroke. And in that moment, he knew the impossible had happened. They had healed. They had become a family. They say money can't solve problems, but that isn't entirely true. Money can't fix Chloe's grief, and it can't buy Lauren a bond with her daughter. But it was Grant Nolan, a single father working as a janitor, who showed them that the most valuable currency isn't money at all. It's empathy. It's the courage to see the person behind the problem and to ask the right questions. Evelyn was driven by greed. Grant was driven by understanding. He didn't just handle the billionaire's daughter. He healed a broken family, including himself. What do you think? Was Grant right to take the job, or was it a leap straight into danger? And if someone framed you the way Evelyn framed him, how would you react? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We truly read every single one. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you won't miss the real-life stories of kindness, karma, and the unbelievable twists of fate we tell here. Until next time, remember this: sometimes what a person needs isn't someone perfect, but someone who truly sees them and chooses to stay.